Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Jim Nail. I'm a member of the Medfield Energy Committee, and I will be your host and MC tonight for the program. I'm really glad that you've joined us for this discussion about heat pumps and the Mass Save program. We do hope this will be a discussion. We've designed the program so there'll be lots of time for your questions after some short presentations, first about heat pumps by Bob Zogg of the Heat Smart Alliance, and then of the Mass Save program by Brian Kearney of Rise Engineering. I'll have more to say about their backgrounds a little bit later as we get into that part of the program. But I also want to acknowledge the organizations that help put all this on, the Medfield Energy Committee, Medfield Environment Action, and Sustainable Medfield. The Medfield Energy Committee, which there's a link there to the website on the town website if you don't know about our work. We are chartered by the select board to advise the town on matters about energy. So we do things like administer green community grants and various activities around that. We've been helping advise the town on solar installations around town on various municipal properties. For years, we've been around about 14 years. We've worked on energy efficiency in various town buildings. We're currently working on the Medfield Community Energy Program, which you may have heard a bit about and will no doubt hear more about in the near future. And the Medfield State Hospital Redevelopment Program, we're looking to make sure that that development is very sustainable. But the big thing we're working on right now is our climate action plan. And maybe some of you tuned in January when we gave a quick preview of some of the highlights of that plan. We're continuing to flesh that out. And again, there will be more information coming out, and we're hoping to have that at town meeting this year. If you're interested in what we're doing, my colleague here, Hilly Passos, would love to hear from you and tell you about some of the opportunities to get more involved. But we also partner regularly with both Medfield Environment Action and Sustainable Medfield. Two similar organizations with slightly different missions. The Medfield Environment Action is a grassroots organization of residents building a movement of informed citizens to support measures by our town and state governments that will positively impact the environment and also help it reduce energy consumption and evolve our energy use to more sustainable and renewable energy sources. Sustainable Medfield, another kind of network of individuals and town groups. It's actually part of the Medfield Foundation and a 501c3 nonprofit. Here's where these community groups and town committees, business groups, religious organizations, all these groups in town meet on at least a quarterly basis and share knowledge, share information, encourage each other, and inspire action around more sustainable ways that Medfield can move into the future. But we're here tonight to talk about, and I'm going to set the stage here with the state goals. Many of you may know about a year ago, the legislature passed and Governor Baker signed into law a next generation climate roadmap that calls for a 50% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030, and then for the Commonwealth to be net zero by 2050. To put it really simply and probably oversimplify what needs to be done, we need to reduce, produce, electrify, and greenify. So reduce, we need to find ways to be more efficient and use less energy to do what needs to be done. We need to produce more with solar panels, wind turbines, and things like that, that is renewable and sustainable. We need to electrify, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight, particularly in the realm of heating and cooling our homes, get off of natural gas and oil and use electric heat pumps. That again, we'll talk a lot about that. And then greenify, and I don't know if that's even a word, but I'm going to make it a word. The whole grid needs to be using renewable, sustainable sources of energy like solar and wind. And the way that that is then expressed in this roadmap to 2050, I pulled out a few specific quotes that I think start to set the stage for our discussion tonight. First of all, to successfully decarbonize, the Commonwealth must almost completely transition energy away from fossil fuels and deploy higher levels of energy efficiency. And that certainly has a lot of benefits for the climate emergency, but don't overlook these benefits in this second paragraph, that combining electrification and energy efficiency allows building occupants to benefit from superior thermal comfort, noise reduction, greater resiliency, improved ventilation, and indoor air quality. All great things on top of the extra dollars that will be in our pockets from doing this, and of course, the less severe impacts of climate change. So how do we get there? This next paragraph talks about how this really relies on infrequent opportunities to change out heating, ventilation, and air conditioning equipment. So, at the end of life, 15, 20, 25 years, air conditioning systems, furnaces, boilers, that's just their natural lifespan. They have to be replaced. So we'll talk a lot about how do we go replace those with heat pumps, not just drop in a new, gas or oil burning piece of equipment. And so implementing electrification in this context is about heat pump based electrified heating systems in place of those gas and oil furnaces and boilers. The good news is this report concluded that electrification of space and water heating is a low risk, cost effective strategy for decarbonizing the majority of the Commonwealth's building stock. So a lot of things coming together, in this trend and to help us move forward into a lower carbon future. And that applies to Medfield when we talk about the building stock in Medfield. This is the greenhouse gas inventory that Hilly put together that we've shown in a couple of different webinars over the past few months, where you can see the bulk of our greenhouse gas emissions are particularly residential buildings, about 40%, a little bit from commercial and industrial buildings, as well as municipal buildings. But all in all, the building sector, in Medfield is about 50 to 53%, something like that. So really important that going forward, we think hard about how we can reduce and electrify energy use in those buildings. And the good news is residents in Medfield are already moving in this direction. These heat pumps are popping up all over the place. I was around town last week looking for them. Here's one at the Montrose School downtown, all of Tilden Village, the senior housing project by the high school. They went totally to heat pumps a couple of years ago. I came across this one and I did ask this homeowner permission to use this, but here's an 18th century house. It has a little plaque on it. It's 17 something or another. It was built, and yet there they are. They've got heat pumps running that, which I think is particularly cool. And here at my own house is a heat pump. And you might go, a heat pump? That just looks like an air conditioner. That's one of the points that we're going to make tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Zogg, who is one of the founders of the Heat Smart Alliance, which is a volunteer organization that promotes clean heating and cooling systems in Massachusetts communities. He has previously chaired the Carlisle Energy Task Force, and he had a 30-year career in energy-related consulting that he retired a few years ago from, and is bringing all that expertise now into the Heat Smart Alliance. He's led numerous evaluations of residential and commercial building energy use, focusing on space heating, cooling, hot water heating, and refrigeration. He's a BS and MS in mechanical engineering, so he really knows his stuff, and lived up in Carlisle for about 10 years now. So Bob, I'm going to stop sharing, let you share, and take it away and tell us everything we need to know about heat pumps.
Great, thank you so much, Jim. Just bear with me one second, I'll pull up my slides. So I'm getting a note that host has disabled participant screen sharing. try to get that resolved here. While we're trying to get my permission to show my slides, let me just get started anyway in the interest of time. Let me just introduce briefly the, okay, good, I'm good to go here. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. Heat Smart Alliance is an organization with a mission to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by accelerating the adoption of energy efficient heat pumps throughout Massachusetts. We consider applications to home heating and cooling, but also water heating. We're an all-volunteer organization. We've got over 50 participants from 28 Massachusetts communities, and we are growing. Our approach is to educate through events like this, to provide one-on-one coaching to people who want to consider heat pumps for their homes and businesses. That's on an as-available basis. And we collaborate with like-minded organizations. And just to keep us from having any conflicts of interest, we do not accept donations or referral fees from any installers or manufacturers. So why should you consider heat pumps for your home? Well, first of all, residential energy use is fully 30% of our total energy use here in New England, and that does not include transportation. From an emissions standpoint, as Jim just showed, it might be closer to 40%. We break that down, over 60% is for home heating and cooling, about 17% for water heating, and a couple percent for clothes drying. That's about 80% of the energy in your home. And those are all loads that can be handled by heat pumps. So heat pumps can make a big difference. If you'd like to decarbonize your home, there's 3 basic steps, and this is similar to what Jim went over. But step number 1 is weatherize. And Brian will talk quite a bit more about that in terms of the incentives available. But really this means insulating and air sealing your home to get the heating and cooling loads as low as possible. Then electrify. That simply means replacing everything that's using fossil fuels with high efficient electric equipment. And don't forget to include your automobile with this. Step number 3, shift to renewable electricity. Doesn't mean you have to put on solar panels. You can buy renewable electricity through the grid, or Medfield is in the process of establishing a community program that will make it very easy for you to buy 100% renewable electricity without making any major changes. So what is a heat pump? We all understand intuitively that heat flows naturally from warm areas to cold areas. But if we want heat to move from a cooler area to a warmer area, we have to use a mechanical device and we have to add energy. And that's what heat pumps do. They're really not a different technology. We use the same basic technology in our refrigerators, our dehumidifiers, and our air conditioners today. Heat pumps are available for home heating and cooling. That means one piece of equipment does both heating and cooling. They're available for water heating and even clothes drying and pool heating. This is a simple illustration to show how the efficiency of a heat pump can be over 100%. In this example, we're taking 1 unit of energy from the electric grid, and we're using that to pump 2 units of energy from outdoors. And we get at no cost and no environmental impact. That results in a total of 3 units of energy going into heater homes, and we've only put in 1 unit of energy as input, so the efficiency here is about 300%. This can even be higher for certain types of heat pumps. What are the benefits of heat pumps in Massachusetts? First and foremost, modern heat pumps provide superior year-round comfort, both summer and winter. Most heating and cooling equipment runs in an on-off cycle that results in temperature swings, but modern heat pumps run at variable speed, which means they tune right in to just the amount of heating or cooling that your home needs to keep the temperature very consistent, very constant, and it really makes a difference. You have to experience it to really understand it. They offer substantial reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, and we'll talk about that in just a second. They can offer modest energy cost savings compared to fuel oil and significant savings compared to propane or electric baseboard. At current prices, natural gas is still a little cheaper than heat pumps on an energy cost basis, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a later slide. And don't forget they're safer. There's no risk of carbon monoxide poisoning or explosions or anything like that. So let's look at the emissions. This is a chart that shows the annual emissions of a heating system for an example home. This is a 2,000 square foot home with typical construction characteristics. Not your home, it's just an example. But as you can see, this analysis is based on best available equipment that you can buy today for all cases. So if you put in a brand new heating system and got high efficiency equipment, that's what we have assumed here for all these different heating systems. As you can see, the heat pumps are at the top of the list. They have the least greenhouse gas emissions by a wide margin. And if you procure your electricity from renewable sources, you effectively reduce these emissions to zero with heat pumps. So that's the beauty. There's a lot of different types of heat pumps. We'll just go over those briefly so you can get a sense of where you might want to focus your attention. The first thing we encourage people to do is to look at your existing heating system, especially the distribution system. In other words, how does the heat get around your house? You may have a hydronic system, which means you circulate hot water or steam to baseboards or steam radiators. You may also, in some cases, have radiant floor heating systems. And typically this hot water is generated by a boiler in your basement. You may also have, instead of hydronic, you may have a forced air system where you have ductwork throughout your home. Typically, you'll have a furnace, perhaps an air conditioner as well in your basement that provides heating or cooling to the ductwork. And you'll have supply and return vents located throughout your home. Obviously, you can have baseboard electric as well, and you might have some hybrid combination of these two, but these are the most common types. So if you have a hydronic distribution system, we suggest starting by looking at what we call a ductless mini-split air source heat pump. These come in a couple different varieties. This particular unit has a single outdoor unit and a single indoor unit that's mounted in a room that you want to heat or cool, and it's connected via refrigerant lines that can run in the walls or run on the exterior of your home. Another variation of this is what we call a multi-split system, which allows the one outdoor unit to connect to multiple indoor units. So this gives you a little bit more flexibility and can cover a higher part of your home with just one single outdoor unit. With either of these types, the indoor units could be wall mounted, or they could be ceiling recessed, they can be floor mounted, and they can even use short duct runs to circulate air to two adjacent rooms. These systems are completely independent other than the controls from your hydronic system, so you can keep your hydronic heating system for backup or emergencies if you choose. Now, I want to point out air-to-water heat pumps because in some cases, people really want to use their hydronic system, and this is especially the case if you happen to have radiant floor heating. People really want to use that radiant heating system, and that's where air-to-water heat pumps come in. They're less common, they're a bit more expensive. Depending on your system, they may require some modifications, but there's something to keep in mind if you really want to use hydronic heating for your main heat source. So if you have forced air distribution in your home, central air source heat pumps are the place to start. As Jim mentioned, the outdoor unit, it looks a lot like an air conditioner. It's probably mounted on a pedestal just to keep it above the snow line. There's two basic ways to go about it. You can have a partial electrification option where you have an indoor unit, again, typically in your basement, where you combine a furnace with an indoor coil that allows you to use the fossil fuel furnace as backup to the heat pump on the colder days. Or you can have an all-electric option that may have electric resistance elements in it to provide the backup heating. If you want to go for the ultimate in energy efficiency and aesthetics, ground source heat pump, also called geothermal heat pump, is the way to go. This particular type of heat pump, it extracts heat from the ground. Typically, boreholes go down into the ground to extract heat. The earth is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit year round, so it doesn't have to pump the heat from quite as cold a temperature, and it gets very high efficiencies. The indoor unit is a neatly factory packaged system that goes into your basement, and these systems, with a little bit of electric backup, typically can provide all of your home heating. One caveat here, it's important to talk to professionals and find out if your existing ducting is suitable for a heat pump. It has to be properly sized, insulated, and sealed, and it may be difficult to do that in some cases, in which case you might be back at looking at the ductless options we just talked about. So let's not forget about our water heating. There are heat pumps available to heat water. We call them heat pump water heaters or hybrid water heaters. They provide over 60% savings in energy and carbon emissions. It can be very fast paybacks compared to conventional electric, especially with the incentives available. And they can be installed by a plumber. They don't require an HVAC technician in most cases. Now, not all plumbers install heat pump water heaters, but a number of them are beginning to do so. It doesn't require any special skills that any plumber doesn't have. Let's talk a little bit about cost. First, the annual energy costs. As I mentioned, this is, by the way, the same 2,000 square foot home we looked at earlier for emissions. And we're using fuel costs and electricity costs from the current winter and current Eversource rates. And we're looking at the annual heating bill you might expect to have with these different fuels and heating sources. As you can see here, based on current energy prices, natural gas edges out the heat pumps a little bit. That doesn't mean that heat pumps are a bad idea if you're using natural gas. We'll talk about that in a bit. Another thing to keep in mind, these are today's energy costs. Energy costs will vary over the life of your heating and cooling equipment. And so, a year from now, this chart might look quite different. Let's talk a little bit about the financial analysis. I know you all love to do this when you make a big purchase. Be sure when you're looking at the first cost, in other words, the quotes you're getting from installers, that you're not just looking at the cost of the heat pump alone. You want to look at what it would cost compared to the cost of replacing your current equipment with something similar. And you should look at both the cost of heating and cooling equipment. You may find that your conventional equipment is a lot more expensive than you remembered 20 years ago when you put it in. So look at cost differences, not absolutes. Look at the incentives available. You have rebates, you have loans, you have tax credits. We'll get to those in a little bit. And you may want to consider putting some kind of a price premium on your carbon emissions if you're so inclined. You may want to consider the impacts on home resale value. There's mounting evidence that heat pumps do add to resale value. And don't forget the comfort advantages as well that may factor in. And as I just mentioned, we do need to accept the uncertainties about future energy costs, so things could change. So what's your action plan? What we recommend, first and foremost, please do not wait for your current equipment to fail. If your current equipment, heating or cooling equipment, is over 15 years old, or your water heater is more than 7 to 10 years old, it's really time to start thinking seriously about replacement. If you wait for a failure, you're bound to be in an emergency situation where you really don't have the time to evaluate any alternatives, let alone consider weatherizing your home. And you'll end up replacing with fossil fuel equipment, and you'll be locked into that fossil fuel equipment for another 15 or 20 years. That's message number one. If you'd like to add air conditioning to your home, you don't have it now, it's a great opportunity for a heat pump because heat pumps provide energy efficient heating and cooling in one device. And certainly if you're planning a major addition, renovation, or a new home, heat pumps can provide 100% of heating and cooling in those new areas. So how to get started? First, our website, heatsmartalliance.org, has some useful information and links to other sources that we think you'll find helpful. Get a free energy home assessment if you haven't already, and weatherize to the extent practical based on the recommendations you get from that. Try to get help from a community heating coach as available. As I mentioned, the Heat Smart Alliance does provide coaching, but right now demand is a little higher than supply, but we'll do our best to accommodate you. And then go out and start getting quotes. Every home is unique. You'll want to talk to at least a couple of different installers. You'll learn something different from each one. And do look beyond first cost. Do look beyond the price, because the equipment offered, the reputation of the installer are important. This is an investment in your home, and you want to look at the full package. And that's it for right now. We'll address questions after the next presentation. Thank you.
And speaking of questions, I meant to say this earlier. There is a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen if you scroll down there. So feel free to input questions in there, or we will have time for live Q&A after our next presentation as well. Speaking of our next presentation, Brian Kearney is here from Rise Engineering. Rise Engineering is a lead vendor of the Mass Save program. And Brian's been with Rise since about 2011 as Director of Residential Services, responsible for managing the home energy services programs for 1 to 4 unit residential buildings in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and on behalf of the utilities and the other program sponsors of Mass Save. He's a big gun here. He has 120 people reporting to him, over 90 home performance contractors and independent installation contractors. He's grown the number of home energy services programs Rise administers from 2 to 6, and more than double the number of customers served to over 28,000 households annually.
There you go.
He's worked for National Grid and Keyspan Energy. So again, another guy with the expertise and the knowledge that we all need here to move forward. So Brian, over to you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you, Bob and Hilly and Helen, who I had the chance to meet earlier. Last week, we did a dry run, and something that stood out from Bob's presentation was the talks about planning ahead and getting that information. Before we even saw each other's presentations, we all kind of touched upon that need to time of replacement and thinking ahead. And I saw some of the questions that came over from the group, and it seems like folks are proactively aware of that. And just knowing what your options are and knowing what's available for Mass Save, I think is hopefully keeping that education in your back pocket for when you are ready to make these changes. And fortunately, things are progressing. Massachusetts is a leader in the nation for energy efficiency. There's a lot of mature energy efficiency programs throughout the state, and we all benefit from that. We all contribute to it, of course, as part of your electric bill and your gas bill, but it also helps us sort of be a leader in the nation for this activity. And it's a great industry that I'm fortunate to be part of. And in all likelihood, maybe some folks on the participating now are somehow intrinsically involved in energy efficiency across the state, and we've all got a lot of work to do. So I will just go ahead, and I'm sharing. I've devised here that's going to happen. So if folks can see my screen, it's a little bit of a different format, but I am showing a deck. It's just in a PDF. Can folks see my screen? Okay, great. So here we are, Medfield. I'm a Medfield super fan. I live down the road. You might, if you catch me in town at Nosh and Grog or somewhere, please say hello. So Mass Save has been evolving their energy efficiency work over plans. Every 3 years, Mass Save goes into a brand new energy efficiency plan. And this is the start, 2022, of a very substantial programmatic change. If folks on the call have participated in the past or had energy audits through the program, the offers are always changing and evolving. And the mission behind energy efficiency is to help transform the market. So one of the things early on that I used to be really excited about was LED light bulbs. And in 2012, we were able to replace one incandescent light bulb with a $50 LED light bulb. And now 50 light bulbs, LEDs are pretty ubiquitous. The program is starting to move away from them, and more as the program is looking to decarbonize, some of these bigger tactics that are out there surround e-pumps and electrification. And then we'll get into barrier mitigation and some other topics. So I've got a lot to cover here. I'm going to go quickly, and then hopefully we'll have a chance to open it up for some conversations after the fact. So again, Mass Save is a partnership between program administrators and member utilities. The Cape Light Compact is a program administrator, but all of the utilities work together. I'm a lead vendor. I work at Rise Engineering. We've got counterparts at Abode Energy Management or Clear Result, and there are home performance contractors as well, a network of contractors that are able to perform this work. We try not to step on each other's toes. And again, there's a lot of work to be done. So that's why there's a lot of different pathways to take, fortunately, in a way that meets your needs and gets you the answers that you need. So we're going to cover mostly residential energy efficiency programs tonight. There are other activities if you own a business or if you work in a large office and that it might be an energy hog. Typically, Mass Save has programs for those as well. There's multifamily activity and what's referred to as income eligible, which is served through our local CAP agencies, and we can talk about that as well. So this is sort of an overarching slide of the different opportunities. Coordinated delivery, or RCD, this is the first bucket, and it is what Jim highlighted and Bob touched upon in terms of residential homes being such a high demand for our energy use. That's generally the place I play is the coordinated delivery activity. Retail, HVAC and appliances. So some people don't recognize that if you go to a big box store and you were to purchase an LED light bulb in years past, those were bought down by Mass Save, by your local utility or your program administrator. And now things like those heat pump hot water heaters are now bought down at the retail level. And it's just, it's a buy down. So those discounts are already pre-applied and covered by the manufacturer, and you're purchasing them at a lower rate. If you are in the market to pull a permit and start construction, it's a very exciting time. Please consider involving the utility and involving the Mass Save program as well in terms of what might be available in an Energy Star Homes program, which involves a person called a HERS rater, and they help you go above code, where a lot of heat pumps and potentially ground source heat pumps and other technology are probably being pitched if you're building a high performance home. There are income eligible programs, depending on where you fall out for the number of people that live in your home and the amount of money that you make. And then there's a subset of that as well, referred to as moderate income, which is still administered by the lead vendors. But there is a income verification portion, and it does afford you a higher level of incentives based on an income verification of being 60 to 80% above the state median income. We do run a really popular financing program, a 0% financing program it was traditionally called the heat loan, but it does a whole host of other things. But we do have a really robust 0% financing program. It's up to $25,000 and 7 years at that 0%. And Mass Save does a lot of education. We work with schools. We work with other program entities that do outreach and education, from bringing in new members of the green workforce out all the way down to helping school programs sell energy efficient products and help support their school. So residential coordinated delivery, why we're here tonight, the audits. As Jim and Bob indicated, with so much that's changing, so many of the incentive amounts that we'll get into, one of the first things that you can do is have a no cost, no obligation home energy assessment. We're running virtual only for a period of time during COVID. We did transition back into in person if that's preferred, and now we can do both. So we took a lot of lessons learned out of the pandemic, and we do run what we can virtually, inspections and things like that. But we also recognize that there's a lot of value and a lot of nuance in each person's home and attic and spaces, and having that personal touch is something that we still strive to do. So in the assessment, we always touch upon health and safety. Doing no harm is first and foremost. We do a combustion safety test of the heating equipment that's there. We identify areas where we might be able to provide an air sealing and insulation recommendation. So we're going to stick our head up in the attic. We're going to want to go poke in crawl spaces and attics, knee walls, and other areas like that, and see what the current levels of insulation are and what we might be able to propose through the program. We also do what's referred to as instant savings measures. So we'll provide low flow shower heads. We'll provide a faucet aerator. We'll even do programmable thermostats, and for a small customer contribution, install a Wi-Fi thermostat as part of the assessment. So at the end of the assessment, once the auditor has completed their task, for the most part, unless you're in a high performance home or you're in a relatively newer construction home, we're likely going to find hopefully something that we can do or that you're in need of. Why did you call us there? You've got a comfort concern. You've got a high bill concern. Something brought us together, and the auditor is going to focus on that. So they will likely give recommendations for how to run insulation and air sealing opportunities. They'll create a proposal and provide that to you. They'll give you some sort of loose guidance on what you have for your existing equipment and what types of equipment you could consider based on your existing infrastructure. But as Bob kind of mentioned, heat pumps open up a whole new world of opportunity to provide secondary systems and combinations of traditional distribution that you wouldn't once sort of combine. We have the opportunity to do that now with new technology. We will look at sort of appliance upgrades and make recommendations or describe what rebates are available. MassSave does have a refrigerator recycling program. If you have a secondary refrigerator in your basement that's hardly used, considering unplugging that and responsibly recycling it, could save you, up to $150 a year just by taking out that fridge. Window screening. So for a number of years, you could finance a replacement of a single pane window to a double pane, and there was not a rebate available. Now going forward in 2022, rebates are back for windows. It's a $75 rebate. You're able to finance that as well, but it must be triple pane. So you can go from single to triple pane, and those are really nice windows. But again, the savings value is there to allow the program to provide you with that rebate, which was a great change for 2022. So current incentives for weatherization. So you can get 100% off of insulation. We were running a program for a period of time during COVID, right at the beginning there. And we've moved that back over to our 75% offer, which is still pretty fantastic. But it's not commonly known that we do have 100% offer if you live in a rental unit. If you pay your utilities and you have a lease, you are eligible to receive the insulation. You and your landlord can make that decision and get your insulation at your property done for 100%. The other thing that we mentioned at the top of the deck was the moderate income. It's a pre-screening process that does look at your income. And if you are deemed moderate income, we will then go ahead and offer you the weatherization work at 100%. We're going to propose it to you both ways. And as you go through the process, if you do recognize that you qualify for that, it just opens you up to a higher tier of incentives. The majority of folks are participating in that 75% off window. And it says 81% or more of state median income. So yes, a good portion of the customers that we serve fall into this. And it is mostly owner occupied and single family buildings. And it's just 75% off. For a number of years, it was 75% off up to $2,000 or 75% off up to $4,000. And we've eliminated the cap. And air sealing is also done at no cost. Bob, you have a question? Or is that a different Bob? This other Bob. Bob, if you just give me a few minutes, we'll get some questions going. Or if it's quick and someone can take you off mute, I'm not prepared to do that as I'm not presenting. But thank you. And then the $500 bonus for weatherization and heat pumps. This is something that is very, very new. It is to the point where we, as the lead vendors and the program administrators, are still working on the mechanics of how we're going to be passing this data. But the intent of the offer is for a partial heat pump, partial rebate, which is if you're not doing a whole home rebate, there is going to be a kicker if you move forward with weatherization and you put in the heat pumps that qualify for those partial rebates. The program is going to pay out a $500 bonus. And then the comment around set weatherization pricing. So we work with a network of around 100 contractors. And regardless of who is going out to your home, the list of measures and the list of offers are all standardized, and the price associated with them are also set. So the offer is pretty incredible. It's 75% off. So you can imagine getting $10,000 worth of work done for $2,500. The pricing can vary on certain materials and practices, but for all intents and purposes, we don't need to shop around to participate in Mass Save because the offers and the materials and pricing are all still the same. One other thing that I think is pretty prevalent in our community, in New England in particular, and where we have a lot of older housing stock, are what are referred to as pre-weatherization barriers. I'm trying to come up with a better word for barrier because I know a barrier is a physical block that you're supposed to climb over, and these are things that are preventing you from moving forward with weatherization. It's not a danger in your home. There aren't any risks associated with it as they sit. But as you're making improvements to your home and you're making changes to your electrical panel and your electrical upgrades, if oftentimes if you're adding heat pumps, it requires a higher amperage of electricity, and you may come across some of these things that you have to make improvements on before you can move forward. So things like knob and tube wiring, often present in homes built before 1940, say. Asbestos, which can be found in what's referred to as vermiculite, which is a rock. It was a ground up rock that had traces of asbestos in it, and it was used as an insulating material. That's something that we look for at the time of the assessment, and we would encourage you and provide you with pathways to get that mitigated. Improperly vented heating equipment, again, from doing the health and safety check, you might have to adjust the pitch of your flue or get a clean and tune or something like that to make sure that if we're going to tighten the home and make adjustments to it, everything is working optimally. So that barrier, moderate income protocols that we talked about, the moderate income incentives will be evolving to provide a incentive of up to $7,000 to help you overcome those barriers. And those payments are going to be made in conjunction with doing the work up front. The previous iteration of the plan had us providing those dollars after the fact. And you can imagine the challenge of providing that money up front, only to wait a number of weeks or months to get paid back. Everyone in the program has access to a $250 barrier mitigation, pre-weatherization barrier sort of form. So if you need a clean and tune, if you need your flue repitched, if you need a knob and tube inspection, all of these are reimbursed by the program, whether you move forward with the work or not, for up to $250. So moderate income incentives, again, this is a brand new process. We've had a moderate income program for a number of years. but the method to engage in the program and apply is changing. And then the offers themselves are expanding to include a lot of access to barrier mitigation dollars, and then as well enhanced incentives for heat pumps. So the income verification will be done at no cost. You do have access to that barrier mitigation dollars. And then these will be available in May. This slide deck is so fresh that some of these things are future state. So we appreciate, I think Mass Save appreciates the patience. We understand a lot of enthusiasm and excitement around getting a lot of these going. And we're working to make sure everything is happening as smoothly as possible as all these really big dramatic changes roll out. So the income qualifications, I thought this was an important slide just to put up for visualization. It has the number of people in your household, and then the less than symbol for income eligible. And then if it moves above that amount between those two ranges, that's where you would fall out and apply for moderate income. And again, it opens you up to a lot of the same benefits that are provided through income eligible, and a lot of the benefits through the market rate program. It's sort of a great bridge to blend all of the program offerings and make sure that there's something for everyone. So income eligible incentives. Typically, you are going to know if you're on a discounted rate code, but if you don't, you can call your program administrator, you can call Eversource, and ask them what rate you're on, and they might ask a few qualifying questions if you think you want to get on a discount rate and you qualify. It does provide you with a significant discount in the cost of the delivery of your fuel. So it's something that you should consider looking into. If you are on that discount rate and you want to participate and get an energy audit, those are done through our local CAP agency, your Community Action Program, and they blend a lot of funding. The WAP dollars, Weatherization Assistance Program dollars, Department of Energy dollars, are all kind of run through the CAP agencies, and that's where they would provide all of these opportunities. With your heating equipment as well, if that's aging or failing, they would even replace that at no cost at all. So let's get into some of the exciting things, right? What people have, if you're on the Mass Save website and you're familiar with navigating that, there have been some recent additions. These rebate forms are on the Mass Save website. So it's a great place to sort of be checking for as things change. But these are some of the greatest incentives I've ever seen for heat pumps, and it's something that people are very excited about. The key here to consider is, as Bob mentioned, there's an offer for a ground source heat pump, so something to consider, and to be very cognizant of what federal tax credits and also state tax credits you can combine with this incentive when you are looking for different heating opportunities. There is natural gas is on the list. That was up in the air for a little bit. It's in for the $10,000. It's in for the $1,250 per ton. A partial home rebate is when you're only going to add a heat pump to a part of your home, or you're not going to fully replace your traditional fossil or electric resistance heating to be part of that whole home $10,000 incentive. And if you aren't able to fully weatherize your home, you might end up defaulting to that $1,250 per ton, which is still a pretty significant incentive, depending on the size of the equipment that you're doing. A single head is typically right around 3 tons. So you can think about if you're getting quotes and you need multiple heads, how many tons that is, and you can do the math on where that lands. It's the max of $10,000 per home, though, just to be clear there. So whole home heat pump rebates. To qualify for whole home, you have to have an energy assessment. And the reason why we're doing it like this is because it does not make the most sense to put in a super efficient heat pump when your home is not fully weatherized and it's not working optimally. It's really the most beneficial thing that you can do is to sort of cross weatherization off of your list. And Bob made a great point about doing everything within reason. I know that there's a lot of challenges around certain people's housing stock, construction style, existing conditions, and getting the energy assessment and sort of getting a baseline for what can and can't be insulated is one of those crucial steps. So again, you get the audit. We weatherize your home, or we deem it fully weatherized, and then you'll move forward with your whole home heat pump installation. For the partial heat pump rebates, one of the things that they talk about requiring to take advantage of the higher, that 1250, is to use what are referred to as integrated controls. And what that basically means is your system, your heat pumps should be used as in the shoulder seasons. They should be used when you would traditionally be switching over to your fossil fuel system. Your heat pump can actually run very efficiently for a significant period of time. And the cost slides that Bob was highlighting, where if it didn't get so cold, Bob's slides would look even better. Heat pumps would look even better. But when it drops down beyond certain temperatures, the cost effectiveness of running your natural gas system may be better. And that is where you would want to look into talking to your installer about use of integrated controls. It is what affords you the opportunity for that higher incentive. So again, they were kind enough to do a big coming soon here. We know this is going to have a lot of interest, and it's really for going forward. You know, if you're considering insulating your home and you're interested in heat pumps, we want you to do these things in conjunction with each other, and that's where the bonus comes in. You're going to be incurring a lot of costs, making these changes. It's not, even with all of these incentives, there still is a layout from you, the homeowner. And this is designed to help you make those choices happen at the same time. Again, more with the rebates. So much has changed. The enhanced rebates amounts are new for this year. And they involve, making sure that the home is fully weatherized, or that you're falling into those moderate income incentives. Not participating, not making sure that your home is fully weatherized. There are still standard rebates where you wouldn't need to have an energy assessment. But again, to get the higher incentives, getting that energy audit is something that you need to do. So for water heater, again, there's additional incentives for just doing water heaters, and we're pushing the days of doing a standalone sort of tanked water heater are waning, and we're pushing you to be doing things like heat pump water heaters, things like condensing water heaters and tankless water heaters. All still great technology above a standard electric backed water heater or the like. So those are the rebates for that. We have product rebates. So we have the $100 rebate for smart thermostats. Whether the program installs one or not, you are able to purchase one out in the open market and apply for a rebate after the fact. Or you can purchase one through the program administrator's online store, which you can get through MassSave as well. We do have the refrigerator recycling and the dehumidifier turn-in events that occur. There's offers for window rebates and dehumidifiers as well, all accessible rebates that you can find on MassSave.com. And a really exciting thing is the batteries. Battery powered lawn equipment continues to come along. It's getting closer and closer. I know somebody who bought an electric snowblower this winter, and it's bigger than my gas snowblower. And it was one of the first things I wanted to know about was how it did on some of those deeper days. But there are rebates available now for things like a lawnmower of up to $75. And at a $400 or $500 for a rebate for a lawnmower, $75 off is pretty decent. So that's a new offer for 2022. I mentioned the heat loan at the top. We're doing okay. How am I doing on time? Should I speed it up here or?
Yeah, because I'd love to. We got a bunch of questions starting to pile up. So,
Yep.
but the heat
Okay.
loan's important.
So we've got the heat loan. Again, it's 0% up to 7 years. And there's a whole host of things that you're eligible for to take advantage of with the heat loan that I mentioned. And there we go. I was getting a little nervous here about running out of time.
Cool.
So, all
Well,
right.
we'll hang around and answer all these questions. And if there are more questions, keep them coming or raise your hand and we'll call on you later. But there's one quick one I can knock off. Are the slides available offline? The recording will be available. I'm not sure if we have permission to share the slides or not.
You have permission to share my slides.
Okay, definitely have the heat pump slides.
Yeah, we can confirm that. I think this deck has been circulated in other circles. So if that's the case, then I'm good with it.
Good. That's an easy one then. Cool. I'm going to just go from the top here. You mentioned the tax incentives for heat pumps. Now, are those time limited or are there other limitations on either the state or federal tax credits?
So for the tax credits, my standard comment there is to consult your local tax professional. We'll provide you with information. We'll provide you with what has been done if you want to give that to your tax preparation folks. I understand that that they do change. They change with administrations and they change with offers. But my understanding is right now they are all still intact. And something that you should consider as part of when you're working through the costs.
Go about a little further out and to say in 2022, the federal tax credit for a ground source heat pump is 26% of the installed cost.
Yeah,
that's scheduled to drop to 22% in 2023. Of course, the government can change those at any time.
sure.
There is a small tax credit available as well, federal tax credit available as well for a heat pump water heater or an air source heat pump. It's a few $100s as well.
Well, speaking of ground source, are there any special considerations, things like proximity to your septic system or sort of general ground conditions that you should think about?
Short answer is yes. Certainly a septic system you want to avoid. Basically, a ground source heat pump requires putting in boreholes, which are basically much like drilling wells for well water. You need a 40-foot well drilling rig to drive in, so you need a space something like 20 by 50 feet. And certainly you don't want that truck drilling in your septic area. So your installer can look over, your situation and tell you what's feasible and what isn't. But certainly these boreholes can go in your driveway. It doesn't have to be out in your yard. There's a lot of places they can put them. So, yeah.
Okay. On the cost slide where it showed that natural gas is slightly less expensive, well, what happens if you have solar? If you have solar panels on your roof, doesn't that make the heat pump then the least expensive option?
It can be. So again, I just updated these charts for the 2022 current Eversource rates. Solar panels are one way to get those costs down. Medfield is again looking at community choice aggregation. There's no guarantee that will get you a lower cost, but it might. And there's certainly other alternative sources you can get for your electricity supply. Eversource will always be the delivery company for your electricity. They'll always be the ones sending you the bill. But right now you have the choice to purchase electricity from different sources if you choose. And even whoever the Eversource website will let you look at that. But those, again, as I said earlier, those rates, Eversource rates could go down in 6 months or 3 months. They change every 6 months. Natural gas prices could go up further. We don't know. The other important point that came up if you have a hybrid system where you're heating with fossil fuels at low temperatures and the heat pump at warmer temperatures, you could actually set that switchover point to the point where you switch to the fossil fuel when that becomes cheaper. So what I didn't really point out is that the heat pumps operate more efficiently at warmer temperatures. So there will be some temperature at which your heat pump is more cost effective than natural gas. But again, remember to weigh in the non-energy cost factors as well in your decision.
Well, that actually leads us to our next question about how well air source heat pumps work when the outside temperature gets very cold. And Brian, you talked about sort of 15 to 30, but I know there are models that work down to 0 and even below 0. So let's sort of unpack the complexities of that.
It does vary quite a bit. It will depend on your home. It'll depend on how the heat pump is sized relative to your home. But some of the best performing air source heat pumps, as you mentioned, Jim, can actually operate and provide useful heating down to something like -10 or -13 degrees. It never gets that cold here. That doesn't mean they'll provide enough heat to heat your home. You may still need some supplemental heat. I have a central ducted heat pump that's 10 years old now, and it operates down to about 0 Fahrenheit, but it will not heat our home completely by itself without the electric resistance backup. And I would say roughly that somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees Fahrenheit is when I need to have some resistance backup to supplement that. But again, it depends a lot on how your heat pump is sized and how well insulated your home is.
Well, that really leads me nicely to our next question. And in fact, in the questions we asked people when they registered, there were a number of people who said they were going to come because they're at the point where they know they need to, replace or upgrade their heating equipment. And one of our anonymous attendees says, well, when you start that search and investigation, who would you recommend contacting? Where do you start?
Well, this is where where it gets tough. Anytime you do something major with your home, you need to reach out to installers. Again, the Heat Smart Alliance can help, as we have people available to go through your specific situation and see, what we might recommend. But aside from that, I would say if you have a furnace and you have ductwork in your home, I would certainly approach installers who offer not just the ductless variety of heat pump, but also offer the central ducted heat pump.
Yep.
Just to make sure that they're not biased to try to sell you what they offer. They offer both, and they can hopefully give you an honest assessment of whether your ductwork can handle a central ducted heat pump or whether you should go with a ductless. Certainly try to look into the reputation of installers. I think there's something to be said about using installers that are relatively close to where you live. Some installers will do jobs that are way off 2 hours from where they have their place of business. I think there is some benefit to getting someone who's a little closer if you can.
And I would just make a pitch for Mass Save as well as a non-biased place to also try. Again, we're not going to sell you a heat pump. If we go there, we're going to provide you with information about insulating your home and identifying your existing equipment and present what the offers are for making those decisions. Bob's absolutely right. I'd encourage you to get at least 3 quotes from different installers who are going to provide different solutions. It's a great point about being close to home. While these are great pieces of technology, they also do require maintenance. And it is something that you're going to have to, build a relationship on to make sure that they're working optimally. So it's something to consider that you don't want them too far away if you need them.
Yeah. Well, Brian, one of the things that I know is coming in the Mass Save program is the heat pump installer network.
That's right.
And can you tell us a little bit about how that's developing?
Sure. So for a number of years, Massave has had a list of contractors. It's up on their website now. But moreover, the heat pump installer network will be an exclusive place where contractors are registered and verified to be installing the latest and the most efficient equipment, and understanding all the rules and guidance that Massave is asking them to follow. And they are building out that HPIN, that heat pump installer network. They're working on that this year, and it should be up and running by 2023. But there's a lot of great contractors that are on that list. And for better or worse, the internet is an amazing place. And you can go on there and do some research and find some reputable companies. And again, get multiple quotes, but they are building out that network as an additional layer of reassurance and access to the rebates and incentives that Massave provides. It's a great question.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned maintenance, and there is a question that just came in about, what type of maintenance is there with a heat pump? And there was also a question about, well, what happens when it snows? And is that a problem?
Sure, and Bob might be a better person, but there's those racks that you saw in your pictures, Jim. Getting them up off the ground is really the key to their success. They need air. So if snow were to kind of pile up, or if you've got a corner in your house that always has a big drift, probably not the best place to consider a heat pump, but that's why they want it up in the air. But Bob knows more than I do.
Yeah. So just in general regarding maintenance on heat pumps, you need maintenance on heating equipment anyway, and it's certainly no more expensive for heat pumps, and it may be less expensive on average compared to fossil fuel equipment. And the big advantage is there's not really a safety issue, with heat pumps. You might, if something's not right, your performance might fall off, but you're not risking safety if there's a problem where you might be with a furnace or boiler. Yeah, the ductless mini splits tend to have an advantage relative to snow and ice because the air flows horizontally through the unit. Well, many of the current central ducted, not all of them, many of the current central ducted systems bring the air in through the sides of the outdoor unit and blow it out the top. Now, in our 10 years, I've had exactly 2 occasions where the top of the outdoor unit iced over and blocked the airflow. Both of those times happened last winter, just when there was some freezing rain or something, just the right temperature, and it made a sheet of ice. Again, it wasn't a problem. The backup heating system came in, and we were fine. So it's rare, but it can happen. And if you have, we have a wood burning stove. If we use that and the heat pump is not running for hours at a time, sometimes snow will build up on the fan blades in the outdoor unit, and there isn't enough torque for that fan to start. So I have to kind of knock the snow off of it. These are minor things for me. If you don't have a wood burning stove, I don't know if that would ever even happen.
Yep. And then the heads themselves, there's just cleaning, general cleaning. There is a condensate line. There is moisture that's having to exhaust itself from the system, and you want to make sure that is clean. Any type of moisture that can kind of build up, and the filters, cleaning the filters and things like that. Quick maintenance.
Very easy to do with a vacuum cleaner once every few months for the ductless systems. For the duct dead systems, you're going to have a filter just like you have in your furnace. You have to replace or clean once in a while.
Exactly. Well, here's my favorite question. If no one else had asked it, I was going to ask it. So how can you tell whether your heating system is near to failing other than just its age? Because, we all want to say, hey, it's working fine. Why should I rush to replace it? Can't I just wait a little longer? Maybe next year I'll have a little extra money to do this, but
the short answer is I don't know how you tell. Certainly when you're doing your annual maintenance, you will probably should ask and see what kind of answer you get. But my understanding is that it can be very difficult to tell until something fails and then you've got a problem. But at least if you're having your fossil fuel equipment inspected annually, hopefully they could give you some sense of impending issues. And the same with your air conditioners. I know a lot of people, frankly, ignore maintenance on their air conditioners, and that's an issue. But yeah, that's
Rust
probably
is
the
a good
best way.
indicator. How rusty is it?
Yeah, how rusty.
Well, I've got a funny story along those lines, because my neighbor and I, the houses that we lived in were built in the mid-90s. They were built on spec. We moved in within a couple of weeks of each other. It's an oil boiler. It's been maintained by like the same company. We get our oil from the same company, and theirs just developed a major leak. And they had finished their basement, so they had to basically gut their basement and remediate all of that. Mine's still going, knock on wood, but that tells me I'm on borrowed time and I need to get thinking real seriously about that. But it is one of those things. I've seen systems that are dead in 10 years, and I've seen systems that go 30, even 40 years. But
and it's hard to tell, that the 90s were a lot of stuff still looks like it pretty good from the 90s, but that's 25, that's 30 years old at this point. So it is hard to tell. With the equipment doesn't look old anymore. It all still looks pretty modern, and some of the fittings and the fixtures, where you can begin to see some sort of staining or dripping, signs of fatigue, would be sort of things to ask your installer about. And then sort of a hopefully you want to time it right.
Yeah. Oh, here's another case. How about you've got central air conditioning, so you've got the ductworks, you've got all that sort of stuff. Can you drop in a heat pump in place of an air conditioning only compressor?
The duct sizing is the primary concern, but go ahead, Bob.
I think it depends. Certainly you want to have a professional installer make that determination. I would say there's a good chance you don't have to make any significant modifications to your ductwork, but I would caution that you'll probably end up replacing both the indoor components and the outdoor components of the system. It's very unlikely that you'll be able to preserve the indoor unit, for example, from your old air conditioner, and just won't operate, won't be compatible with the new heat pump and the blower that you need to use.
Right. Yeah. That in your slide, that picture of the full heat pump with electric resistance would need to be that indoor unit would have to be replaced with that, plus the picture of your outdoor unit, Jim.
Here's a really interesting question. I really like this one. So does a hybrid water heater extract the heat from the basement if the water heater is located down there? And if yes, how much colder does it make the basement? And wouldn't that make the floors of the first floor colder? And so, how does that affect, the cost compared to a natural gas hot water heater?
Yeah, I can always tell when there's another engineer in the audience and they ask questions like that. It's a question I love, because I think intuitively, our intuition can lead us astray on this question, actually. So yes, not all, but most heat pump water heaters are a packaged unit, and wherever your water heater is, you'll be extracting some heat from that space. So most of the time it's in an unfinished basement. A lot of us don't really care if the basement's a little bit cooler. It will be a little cooler. It might also be a little drier, by the way. So that's a nice upside. It doesn't necessarily do all the dehumidification you might need, but it might supplement your dehumidification needs. But yes, it will make your basement a little smaller. We have a very small basement. It's about 450 square feet. I would guess that it's probably 5 degrees cooler with our heat pump water heater. I don't actually measure it, and I don't really care. Now, the impact that has on your home heating, though, That's the question. It turns out, and I've been through this analysis, it turns out it's not as bad as you might think. It does shave some of the effective efficiency off of your heat pump water heater, but it's not bad. And when I said 60% savings or 70% savings, that accounts for the impact it has on your space heating load. So there's exceptions if you're using electric resistant spaceport for heat, if you have your water heater upstairs in the fully conditioned space, you know, it's a little bit more of an impact, but, you know, it's generally not as bad as people intuitively think.
And actually, I just saw a study on that very topic, and I think it's very close to what you said. It might be somewhere between 3 and 5 degrees. But when the heat pump water heater shuts off, you know, it actually recovers, you know, pretty quickly. And if you're,
Good point,
if you,
Jim. I've got
if
a
you still
rebate
have a,
study.
I'll have to get that to you. But if you still have a fossil fuel heating appliance down there, like while I still have my oil boiler down there, that would be awesome because it would just pick up some of the waste heat from that. But
That's what we're
let's
trying to
see.
get rid of. It's the fossil fuels. So.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let me see if there's anything else. Well, there's one question that I don't know. I don't know if there's an answer to this. What is a typical full house heat pump cost? Is there any such thing?
Where from 5,000 to 50,000? How's that?
Yeah,
No, and I'm not being deliberately glib here. It does depend a lot on your house. If you have friends and I rented a house in northern Vermont, much colder than we are. It was an energy efficient home. It was probably 1,800 square feet and was heated with one mini split, ductless mini split heat pump. Okay. And that would probably run you about $5,000. Now, on the flip side, I live in Carlisle. We have a lot of big homes, 4,000 or 5,000 square feet that are very complex, built decades ago, not super energy efficient. They get a proposal where they're going to put an indoor head in every room. They're going to have 4 or 5, 3 or 4 outdoor units or something like that. They can see quotes that are 40 to 50,000 before the incentives. It really depends. The central ducted systems, probably somewhere in the middle. If you have a single zone, you might get away with something in the 15 to 20,000 range. But again, take a look at what it would cost to put in a high efficiency boiler or furnace, plus a high-end air conditioner that would give you the same comfort benefits of a heat pump. And you might be shocked to see how much that would cost. So it's not, you want to look at the difference between the two.
Yep. One of the sort of the rules of thumb or something that I'm hearing is, and Bob could probably correct me or thumbs up or thumbs down, is some of the averages we're seeing is $5,000 per ton. So I don't know if you feel like that's high or low, Bob, or.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think it's not just the total capacity, but it's also the complexity. How many different rooms are you trying to heat independently, and how many, you know, where do they have to run the refrigerant lines and things like that? Do you have to upgrade the electrical panel?
Yep.
Site-specific issues there.
Yeah.
A lot of variability.
This actually relates to a question that just came in that said, well, if you need a backup system, then aren't you running and maintaining 2 systems and thus reducing the cost benefit of installing a heat pump, which, you know, as you were saying, does both?
Well, you don't necessarily need a backup system. Many homes operate with just a heat pump. The issue is typically to do that, you need to have either a fairly new home or you have to do a good job on your weatherization. Otherwise, it becomes a little impractical. Second, I'll differentiate on backup systems. We have electric resistance, as I mentioned. If you do have duct work, that's easy to do. And that's really low maintenance. There's really no additional issues. It's really inexpensive to put in. If you're using a fossil fuel system for backup, yes, you're going to have to keep that maintained. You're going to have to keep two heating systems operating effectively. Yeah.
Brian, here's a question for you. So does the homeowner apply for the heat pump rebate, or does that come through the seller and installer?
That's a great question. The installer should help you with the process. You can do both. You can typically sign it over, or the installer might factor it into their purchase price, or depending on their comfort level and their involvement, they might say, I'll help fill out their portion of it, and you yourself, homeowner, can apply for the equipment itself. So it's a conversation that you should have with your installer, and different installers might have different approaches to it. Typically, the application for the heat loan is done by the homeowner themselves. So you're getting a little, you're getting involved with helping set up some of the paperwork. If you're just taking access to the rebates themselves, oftentimes the installers do help facilitate that, and you might just have to sign a piece of paper.
Got it. And I think there's like one last question here, and this is a really good one. This is a person who has installed a whole house heat pump system. Congratulations, that's great. But was asking for your advice. What are the best practices then in operating it? Like we're used to with fossil fuel systems, you turn them down at night, or when you're away from home during the day at work, and then have them heat back up. Do you do that, or do you do something different with a heat pump?
Well, the general advice with a heat pump is it's better to set the thermostat and leave it at whatever setting you want. Because if you turn it down at night, it actually uses more energy than it saves to warm back up in the morning. And that's one issue with heat pumps that people need to get used to. Some people just like their bedroom cooler, which is fine. Just leave your bedroom cooler all the time. You're not going to be in your bedroom typically during waking hours, so it doesn't matter. And that's pretty easy to do if you have a ductless system. If you have a ducted system and you don't have zone control in your bedroom, you can still just shut off the registers there and keep most of the heat out of your bedroom that way. So simple solution to that issue. But that's the main advice is don't set down the temperature of the whole home overnight. Certainly, if you're going to take a ski vacation in the wintertime and be away for several days, yes, turn it down. You can set the thermostat to come out in advance of your return so your house is warm and all that.
If I could chime in, so I just had this discussion recently with an installer, and this was a system also with resistance heat backup. And he said anytime the difference between the room temperature and what you set it at is more than 3 degrees, then automatically the resistance heat will come in. And of course, you want to kind of avoid this because it becomes really expensive. So gradually warming it up, or as you said, leaving it at a constant temperature is really what you want to do.
The controls on the heat pumps will vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, but that doesn't surprise me. It is better to ramp up in a controlled way gradually when you do have a setback.
Yeah, because I think to me the big difference between these systems and traditional systems, Bob, you alluded to it before, is that they maintain this very constant temperature, and they do that by having variable speed in the compressor. So on a day like today, when it was 40-ish out, it doesn't need a whole lot of heat, so it'll run at a very low speed. Versus a traditional furnace or boiler, it'll, again, the temperature, as you showed, it'll drop. If you're trying to keep your house at 68, it may wait till the house drops to like 66. And then it comes on full blast and blasts a bunch of heat into the room until it gets up to, maybe 70, and then it turns off. And you get that back and forth. But again, these systems are able to say, oh, I just need a little bit of heat, so I'll run at like 20 or 30% of capacity because that's all I need right now. And so that's why if you just leave it set at the temperature you want, it is much more efficient. Yeah. Brian, another one just came in for you. This is great, people. I love that we're still getting these questions. Thank you for being so engaged. All right, I just lost it. I gotta scroll back down to it here. This is, so if you've had a mass save audit and had some weatherization done in the last 2 years, can you get another audit, or do you have to wait, or how should this person handle it?
Yeah, so if there's, you would recognize if there were still opportunities. So if you're considering installing a heat pump and your home has been deemed fully weatherized, that is what opens you up the opportunity to those enhanced incentives. So depending on your proposal, if all of the work was done, if a good portion of the work was already completed through the weatherization process, you should be effectively complete as far as what's been fully weatherized. Every 3 years, you can go ahead and get another assessment. But if there were sort of existing things on your proposal that you didn't complete at the time, if you had a very large project and you wanted to break it up over multiple years, they could sort of re-engage with your energy assessor and look over and see if we can't send you an updated proposal. Or if you really need somebody to come back out there and the timing is right, we would come back out and take a look to see if there were additional opportunities. But it all is contingent on how much of the work you actually did at that time.
I'm not seeing any other questions come in. I'm just scrolling through. Do we have any hands up anywhere?
I hope we covered Bob's question. I apologize to Bob earlier, and the other Bob who raised his hand during my.
Yeah, I muted him, but then he left before
Oh, okay.
you stopped. So I do have a question. So if you get an audit, but there's no work to be done, do you qualify for anything?
Yeah, so again, we're kind of working through all these really sort of narrow questions about that. But if your home is fully weatherized, then yes, it does qualify. So it's all determining, whether or not it's and if it's a newer construction or it's a well-built home. But again, it would. Yep, it would.
Well, actually, define newer construction for us too.
Okay.
Because, as I said, my home was built in the 90s, and I don't think
that's new construction.
Well, but I've had a couple of mass save audits, and they've done a little bit here and there, but nothing really all that big.
Yeah. So and if you had a well-built home in the 90s, what code was at the time. So do you know how the R value of the insulation in your attic? Probably do.
I actually spray foamed my attic a few years ago.
Okay.
But before that, it was probably R18, R20 maybe.
So if you've got R20 in your attic right now, Mass Save will bring that up to R49. So a new construction, I'm thinking new building code. They have what's called IECC, the International Energy Code. And I think where Massachusetts is generally a few years behind the iterations of that energy efficient code. So, something that was built in 2017, 18, 19, that's probably a pretty super efficient home. It should be. But something in the 90s, if it does have, just a few layers of batt insulation, there's an opportunity to add insulation to a house like that. Except for yours, because you got a hot roof. So you're way ahead of the game.
Exactly. Well, but speaking of the energy codes, because it wasn't really until the 80s when building codes started incorporating energy codes. Am I right about that? So
yeah, and there's we've got sort of some charts and some research about how there's correlations of when codes change, because just because code is code doesn't mean that the house is built to code. So the actual construction lags, and Massachusetts uses what's called a user-defined reference home. So they develop a baseline, which actually isn't necessarily building code. It's typically slightly lower than that, because it takes several years for the trades to sort of catch up with all of the new techniques and approaches to it. But at the end of the day, an efficient home is a well-built home where attention and care is taken to infiltration and exfiltration to where how air moves and just how insulated the spaces are. You can use traditional materials. You can use traditional building techniques. It's just taking care of where some of those big, energy losses can exist.
So, I mean, it's pretty safe to say if your home was built in, say, the 70s or early 80s or before, and it hasn't had any major work done to it, chances are pretty darn good there's a lot of opportunity for improving the efficiency of that home.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things, our place here is built in 1968. It's got 2x4 construction, and it has batt insulation. It probably has an R13 in the walls. And I know that, they might be able to get a hose up there. We might be able to insulate it, but it's the cost effectivenesses of it and the challenges sometimes aren't there. So there's some variability around, wall insulation, but an attic in a house of this construction that does just have a layer of fiberglass up there, there's definitely opportunity. And then we focus a lot of attention on the sill, the basement sill, and where we get a lot of air infiltration as well. And typically that's an exposed area that we can take some attention to. Door kits, door sweeps, traditional things around the doors, knee wall spaces, and attics, air sealing, plumbing chases, plumbing gaps around a chimney chase. Some of the big places we want to kind of tackle that, dam around certain areas. Something else to consider is if you are looking at installing, if you have no mechanical equipment in your attic and you are looking at putting in one of those central heat pumps, let's coordinate that with your installer. They are not going to want to start swimming through a brand new sea of cellulose. The price is going to go up if that's the case. So we might want to try and time it where the unit is going in and then you're insulating that space. But if you have existing equipment up there, what we traditionally do is dam and create a catwalk and a space around it. And then the far corners of your attic and the like have a higher depth of insulation.
Right. Actually, that question came in about, I guess, sort of defining in a little more detail, what is weatherization? Does that mean a new roof, an attic insulation, windows and doors? How much goes into weatherization?
Yeah, so that's a really tough question that we're trying to work through a simple answer that we can check a box and have somebody feel like they're fully weatherized. But it's weatherization for a lot of people's homes is a journey. So you want to make sure that the attic is fully insulated, that any basement crawl spaces, any sort of dirt foundations have a poly vapor barrier down, and air sealing has been done in a crawl space type of area, and that your walls have insulation, that they're not empty cavities. But if it has an R13 batt in it, and the auditor says they can't get any more, then your walls are weatherized, your walls are insulated. There's certainly more that can be done, but we want to do this, as Bob commented, within reason. So there is a fine line, but you also don't want to get to a point where you're so focused on putting in the heat pumps that you're disregarding taking steps that that you can. But if you have certain challenges in certain spaces, you're going to have to sort of balance that compromise. But we do want to, focus. The biggest bang for your buck is definitely the attic work. It's why we all put on a winter hat. You lose a lot of heat through your head. You lose a lot of heat through your attic. And that's some of the areas that we would want to focus on.
Yeah. And maybe this wasn't asked, but I'll ask the question. So a similar question about air sealing. Can you describe more what goes into air sealing?
Sure. So using the same sort of body analogy, I consider a nice wool sweater as insulation, and I think of air sealing as your windbreaker, as your jacket that goes on your exterior. So a lot of times they'll use what's referred to as two-part foam, or if you've been to your big box store and you see the great stuff, the can of spray expanding foam. Air sealing is chasing down air gaps, air leakage in your home. We run what's referred to as a blower door test, unless you have asbestos pipes or existing, evidence of past asbestos. They won't run a blower door, but we get a baseline for the number of air changes per hour that a home is supposed to have. And there's a level of air changes per hour that you could drop down to a safe level. And as you can imagine, if air is moving through, you're losing that heat. The temperature is those swings that your heat pump has to keep up with are mitigated through air sealing. So there's not a lot done around a window itself. You want to make sure that the window is well installed and properly sealed around that. But then, door sweeps, the plumbing chases, as I mentioned, chimney chases, and around the basement sill perimeter. And all of these small holes add up. So sometimes the equivalent of the air sealing is you might have the equivalent of a window open in your house for the thousands of small air leaks. And closing that window is the act of taking a few hours of time to do the air sealing at the house. And it's free. That's all done at no cost.
I think this will be the final question, because we've been going for a long time, and really appreciate you hanging in with us, because it's been great to get all these questions and have so much conversation here. But anyway, Windows, back to Windows. Any rebates to upgrade from double pane to triple pane, or is it just replacing single pane, as you were describing with the triple pane?
Yeah, the way I understand it, it's single to triple, and that there are not current incentives for the double to triple. Again, it's a benefit cost that the program generally runs. And the savings from the energy savings from double to triple is probably good. And I'd love to do that too. And if you could, I would highly encourage you to do it. But they don't have a rebate for it at this point. If you're really ready to go all in, if you're coming out of single pane windows and you're going to triple.
All right. Well, I'll give each of you a last word, and then I'll have a couple of closing comments. Or Brian, anything else you'd like to share with us as we close out?
Sure. So the Mass Save number is easy to remember. It's 866-527-SAVE or 7283. You can find us online at Mass Save. You can Google us. And my email was on the end of the presentation, and I'm around. I love this stuff. And if I don't have an answer for you, we can put you in the right, hopefully in the right place. So feel free to reach out.
Great. Bob.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight, and remind you that the Heat Smart Alliance website, heatsmartalliance.org, has quite a bit of additional information, and you can reach out to us and ask questions. And as I mentioned, we're an all-volunteer organization. We're always looking for more people who are interested in heat pumps and interested in fighting climate change. So feel free to reach out to us there as well. I'm always happy to talk with people and answer questions about what we do. And yeah, so that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Super. Bob, thank you. It was super information. Brian, it was super to hear about the new things going on at Mass Save. Gives us all a lot to chew on, and obviously a lot of support for the things that we need to do to fight climate change. And with that, I want to thank my support group, Hilly Passos and Helen Dewey, who helped organize this presentation, as well as our colleagues I mentioned up front, the Medfield Environment Action and Sustainable Medfield organizations. So for all of you, there is a lot of support in town here for any of your questions. You can reach out to any of those organizations and the Medfield Energy Committee. And really looking to get Medfield on this path toward the 50% carbon reduction 2030 and net zero 2050. That, as you saw, we all need to play our parts, and you've made a good start by coming tonight and spending time with us. So Thank you again. Good night and good luck becoming more energy efficient and lower carbon.